First of all, you need to understand what your values and behaviors should be. You need to determine what are the values for the organization, what do they mean to everybody, and how do you get everybody to share them. In building the culture, first of all, even before you get to the values, do you know what your brand is? The brand is really how everybody sees and perceives you outside. And you need to make sure that that is shared by everybody in the organization so that when anybody is asked about anything that you want to portray, that is the same message and it's the same portrayal of the organization. You need to understand what is it that makes these values, mission and vision real for people. What you need to do is you need to come up with a set of behaviors that create change in the organization towards what it is that you want it to be. To do that, you can't just issue statements. You can't just tell people, this is what everything is, this is what we now are, and so on. What you need to do is you need to identify who are the authentic leaders, informal leaders, not your organizational leaders, but who are really the opinion leaders in your organization. Have them exhibit the behaviors you want. So if you want to change something that is really important, say, we are now a no-kill shelter. What does that mean for people? What are the behaviors that people need to exhibit? And how do you actually portray that to everybody? Your informal leaders are then the people who will share this with everybody across the organization. And you really create a viral distribution of the message that you have, and you have everybody listening to these informal leaders. Once you are in a situation where people understand what's going on, you really need to understand how to deal with the change in the organization. Change management is a big issue. You need to understand what is it what are the elements of the change, how do you want to instill that change, and how do you create an environment where this change and the conflicts that arise from it can be adequately addressed. You also need to make sure the new behaviors go viral. I talked a little about how the informal leaders are the ones that interact with everybody. They need to understand what are their networks and how do they use that network to get the messages out into the organization. Once you feel that you have a good understanding, and it is important that you talk to people, that you check that they understand what's going on. You need to make sure that anything you do from going forward, all new programs, all new initiatives and so on, are really based on this new set of behaviors and the new values. You also need to make sure you get quick wins out of it. When you put your plans together, and we'll talk in another segment about how to put plans together, having quick wins, demonstrating what's going on is important. You also need to make sure that roles and responsibilities are clearly understood by everybody in the organization. Organizations, especially non-profit organizations, have people that work because they love what they do. And you need to make sure that you take advantage of people who want to do what it takes. But you also need to make sure you understand how to channel that energy and that commitment into the same direction that you want to take the organization in. Again, the example about turning a shelter into a no-kill organization, people probably have vastly different opinions about what that means, and you need to make sure that you talk to everybody and make sure that you have a common understanding of what that means. Once you have alignment across the organization, you can now start the actual planning. You start strategic planning, you think about what it is that's going to happen in the organization, and you then turn that into individual action plans, budgets, etc. One last thing here, this is difficult. You need to think about what are the politics that's behind what happens on a daily basis in the organization, and how do you want to deal with that. So think ahead, think about what might go wrong, and think about what it is that you want to do to make sure that this becomes real.